I had tried all kinds of things to get my tongue under control. I am a relatively well-disciplined individual, so it was actually quite frustrating to me that I couldn't figure out how to tame it, as James says. No one can tame the tongue. And I certainly couldn't. And I tried and I tried and I tried. Nothing worked. And then in 1987, I bought my first company. In fact, Mark Philpell actually sold me my first company. So he remembers this well, although he wasn't there for this. When I bought the company, I stood in front of all of my employees, first day that I was there, and I held up my Bible, and I said to my employees, I said, we're going to run this company on biblical principles. And if you see me doing anything which violates these principles, I am giving you permission right now to come to me directly. There will never be any repercussions. I won't hold it against everyone. I want you to hold me accountable that we do this. And I said very straightforwardly, I said, look, if I disagree with you, we'll talk about that, because there's different ways of thinking about it. But I said, I covet that you would do that. I immediately left that meeting and went into a staff meeting. It was probably not more than a minute and a half into the staff meeting when the first curse word was about ready to come out of my mouth. It didn't take longer than that. Now, I don't want to make this weird and I don't want to make it strange, because it wasn't that. But I do want to make it clear that what happened at that moment was that somehow God, by His Spirit, spoke to me and said, look, you just stood in front of all those people, and you said you're going to run the company with biblical principles. Now, are you going to keep your word, or are you going to defile me? And what sticks in my mind is that notion of defile. Are you going to defile? Never before in my life had I thought about my tongue as being His, as being an instrument through which my ownership by Him was represented. And it was almost as if God took a hot coal and stuck it to my tongue. And you can talk to my son, you can talk to my daughter, you can talk to my wife. They will tell you the exact same thing. I came home that evening and my tongue was singed. It was changed. Now, I won't say that I haven't said a curse word since then, but it's been very incredibly rare. And God showed me through that what it's like to allow God to work through me and not me to do the work. Now, I also learned some things about my own deceit of my own heart. Let me share those with you. They are not pretty, but looking back on them, I think they're clear. One, I'm fully capable of understanding and believing a truth. I'm fully capable of teaching that same truth. And I'm fully capable of violating the very truth that I believe, teach, and thought I understood. You follow me? That is a deceitful heart. That is a heart that Christ speaks about as the heart of a hypocrite. It's not a pretty picture. It's not something that I'm proud of to say to you, except for this. That's the bad news. In spite of my pitiful condition, God chose through this circumstance, or whatever you want to call it, and I'm not sure I completely understand exactly what it was or how it worked, but through whatever the circumstance was, God, by His grace, took this pitiful heart that I had and transformed it to one that would not defile me. Second of all, and it also revolves around SATEC, which Mark, I don't know that Mark's ever heard it, but when I bought SATEC, I had fairly decent backing. I had National City Bank, which at that time was actually a fairly good bank. And I had a number of people who were willing to invest in what I was doing. And I had a plan that I thought would glorify God in the way that I would work through the business. I had a plan that I would buy a number of companies, I would put them all together, and I would run them all with biblical principles, and all to the glory of God. And I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek. I was going to do it all to the glory of God. And God, who has a great sense of humor, right after I bought SATEC and was starting on the second acquisition and thinking about it, right in the middle of that, God had a different idea. In the middle of all that, Parkside Church came to me and asked me to teach a course on biblical finance. And I thought, that's a piece of cake. I like this finance stuff, and as these guys know, I loved it at Harvard. So I can do that standing on my head. That's not a problem. So I took it under my wing. What started out as a 6-week course ended up to be an 18 weeks. And what started out with me thinking I knew what I was doing had me reading all sorts of books that I had never read at Harvard. And in the middle of all that, God began to teach me about what His ideas were about debt. And they were quite different from what I learned at Harvard. And so I'm in the middle of this thing with a plan that I think is incredible, that's going to glorify God, and I go teach this course by God's grace of what I'm supposed to do, and everything I'm teaching in this course is totally opposed to what I'm about to go do in the business world. And I am stuck. So I began to ask different people all kinds of advice. I had a lot of good business advisors, Mark and others. And I asked them about it. Most of the businessmen that I asked basically asked me one question. They said, you know, is it legal? If it's legal, what are you fiddling around with? Get on with it. I went to pastors and I started to ask them questions. And when I would ask them questions about it, as soon as I started talking about subordinated debt and different kinds of debt, the pastor's eyes glazed over. And they sort of checked out on me and were gone. And I knew at that moment that if I wanted to just stay the course, I could do it and feel good. But I also knew that wasn't a good answer. So I struggled with, what do I have to do? Some of you will remember there was a guru of finance at that time, Larry Burkett, picked up the phone and called Larry and said, hey, I got this problem, I need some help. Larry said, I can't help you, we're a nonprofit, we can't do this kind of thing. But I had somebody who used to work for me, and his name is Ron Blue, and I think he might be able to help you. So I called Ron Blue up. Ron said, I can't help you, I don't think, that problem's a little too hard for me, but I have a man working for me who I think can. His name was Roy Ludwig. Roy had been involved in running about 5 or 6 other companies. So I got Roy on the telephone. I called Roy up. Roy talked to me, understood every word I was talking about. He was an incredibly deep, Bible-learned man. He was an incredibly good and competent businessman. So I got on an airplane, flew to Atlanta, and Roy Ludwig and I spent 10 hours together in one day. We started in the morning and we went all day long, and we went through everything that we were talking about. And to make a long story short, Roy did a wonderful job with me of answering questions, of asking questions, of probing, of digging at the heart of the issue. And there's a 3-page letter that I still have in my files that I have from Roy. But when I came back, this was the key issue that was there for me.